Hello again and welcome back to my music production basics series. You may be wondering why I just ran up and down my room. This is because we're going to be talking about reverb today, and reverb is the sound of your room. There's a general theory of recording where you want to record everything as dry as possible because you're going to later be changing the reverb either through software using your DAW or with a analog hardware reverb. You've got things like spring reverbs, plate reverbs, hall reverbs. These different types are going to change the sound of your recording to emulate different kinds of rooms. So in this video, I'm going to be walking through a vocal as well as a guitar and showing a few different kinds of reverbs, how different ones work, the different kinds of settings you can choose. I'm going to be covering two different methods of how you can apply them, either in the channel strip or using buses, which is what I recommend, and we'll get to why I recommend buses. And we're just going to listen and play with some of the effects and see where we can use this. So first, let's listen to our dry vocal. This is Carla Lyric 02, which is a stock Apple loop.
Get up, get up, get up, get up.
All right, so that's pretty dry. There's a few voices of unison. They either recorded it a few times or added a delay effect to make it sound like there's more than one singer singing. So I'm going to start with a couple of Logic stock reverbs. Space Designer is what I use the most, although Silververb is also excellent. And then I'm also just going to show a couple of third-party reverbs just to show the different types and sounds that are available. So let's start by opening up Space Designer. So this is Logic's sort of mainline reverb plugin. You go into here, there's lots of presets, small spaces, medium spaces, large spaces. Remember, we're talking about the room, the environment. So for example, if we go into a small space, we could do a little room, a wooden chamber. They love using these sorts of descriptions because that's really what the reverb is trying to emulate. So if we put this wooden chamber reverb on the vocal, they're trying to suggest that you're trying to make the vocal sound like it was recorded in a wooden chamber. Now this gives you a lot of versatility because you don't always have a wooden chamber available to record in. You don't always have a large choir hall to record your death metal band, right? So recording dry and applying reverb lets you add different atmospheres very easily. It lets you change the atmosphere and experiment with different types of recordings. So let's start with this vocal hall preset. So first, let's just listen to what it sounds like, and then I'll walk you through the parameters.
Get up, 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 get up.
So you can see it's very echoey. Now I went with a large space preset, so it has a very long envelope. So this line here is called your envelope. If we are to move this back, it's going to shorten the length of time that it's sort of echoing for.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up.
So to really emphasize this, what I'm going to do is take down my dry signal. Now you measure how much reverb there is and how wet it is. Imagine your recording as a towel, and the dry towel is your dry recording, and you're just running it under the water, and that's your reverb. So it's just dripping. You know, something can be dripping with reverb. So I take the dry all the way down. Let's take the wet all the way up. Now you're only hearing the effect of the plugin. So you can see when I shorten the envelope, it cuts off quickly because our length of time has decreased. Now I can increase or decrease the scale of this with my length knob. Another thing I can do is change the shape, and I was just using Command Z to go back to the preset here because I lost my line and it got all rectangular. But you can shape this, so you can do logarithmic or parabolic envelopes, and you can really just kind of play around to get the sound that you want. And I recommend going all the way wet when you're playing with the sound, just because it's easier to hear. So if I want a really warm reverb, I might try to round this off, make it a little bit longer. Something that you can run into is a clash between the original sample and the reverb. In this case, you might want to add a pre-delay. I tend to stick, under 100 milliseconds or so, and that just adds a little bit of space between your dry and your wet signal.
Get up, get up, get up, get up.
If we increase this just to show it,
Get up, 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 get up.
we're adding a 1 second delay between when the reverb signal comes through and when the dry signal ends.
Get up, get up.
30 to 60 milliseconds is usually the world that I stay in. Our size is going to give us, again, a different scale of our attack and decay, which shapes the envelope. When you're in a smaller room, there's less echo. If you yell in a giant cathedral, you're going to get a lot of reverberations and distortions and modulations on your dry performance. But if you're in a smaller room, there's less room for echo. So our wet signal is going to be closer to our original, giving us a more transparent reverb.
Get up, 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 get up.
A really strong slapback effect when I had it up at 100 milliseconds, so we took that back down. Now let's take a look at another stock Logic reverb called Silververb. This is a less versatile plugin than Space Designer. You can see there's way fewer presets. You don't get to choose as many different reverb styles, such as plate, hall, room, etc. This one does not have a graphical envelope shaper, so you can't drag and change the shape of the envelope. It still has a dry and wet knob, just the same as before. It still has a pre-delay, a size, and a time to allow you to shape how long you want your reverb to be. So this gives you a little bit of control over the size of the space that you're emulating. This one also includes EQ, which is helpful. So with reverb, you can run into trouble in the extreme ranges of the frequency band. So up in your upper mids, up around, maybe around 6,000-7,000 hertz plus, and below about maybe 200 hertz, you can get some really boomy muddiness from reverb, as well as some very exaggerated sibilance. So your S sounds can be amplified in an unpleasant way by reverb. So I often like to put a high cut and a low cut on my reverb to shorten the range of frequencies that the reverb is outputting. This can save you a lot of space in the mix while retaining the sound and tone of the effect. So let's put a metal staircase on this vocal. So let's listen to it dry again.
Get up, 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 get up.
This is a very spooky kind of definitely echoey reverb. Let's go ahead and play around with this reflectivity parameter.
Get up, 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 get up.
So this is basically affecting the feedback, so how the reverb is turning itself into additional reverb and modulating over time. So reflectivity is how much it's going to repeat and loop itself and echo from its own echo, sort of. And then modulation is exactly what is happening in that feedback. So let's set it really high again. Let's listen just to the wet signal. Now our rate is how quickly the modulations are happening. Our phase is how much the wave is shifting. So you can see we can get some really psychedelic kind of warpy stuff out of just this one reverb plugin by messing around with the feedback and the modulation of the reverb. You can also automate all of these parameters, so you can have something slowly kind of distort into this echoey, nightmarish mess, which you can get a lot of cool effects out of. The third plugin we're going to look at is our first third-party plugin. So this is a plugin by Universal Audio, which you can get by purchasing a universal audio interface, which is fairly expensive. This one, I don't really like the sounds that I get out of it, but I really like the idea of the interface. So that's why I'm going to show it off here, because it really emphasizes the whole, you're designing the space that your recordings are going to be played through. So you get a shape editor. You can change the shape of the room that the reverb is emulating. So let's say you want your recording to be in a cylinder. You can do that. You want to be in a shoebox. You can do that. Horseshoe. It goes on and on. You can change the size of the shape. You can put two different ones in here. So let's say we want 1/2 corridor, 1/2 horseshoe. You can have that. You can change the materials and flip between two. So we can have sand on the floor and marble on the walls.
Get up, 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 get up.
Now again, we've got a few different envelopes here, similar to the Space Designer. They're a little bit different though, so we can increase our decay and our attack, as well as the length of time of the entire envelope, as well as the shape of our resonance across an EQ curve. So here is where we can do sort of our little cutoffs, just like we did with the silver verb.
Get up, get up,
So this is a more
get up.
mid-rangey. So that's another just sort of cool one that I wanted to show off. Now, the reverb that I've been using most often is Native Instruments ROM. This was free for a time, although now it's up to $100. It might be free again over the holidays. There's a ton of great deals around, like Black Friday. Even right now, there's a bunch of spring sales going on. There's one for Sound Toys, for example, where everything's super, super discounted. So be sure to look for deals when you're looking for plugins. I hate spending money, so I got this. I was lucky enough to pick it up when it was briefly free. ROM I would compare to Valhalla reverbs. Valhalla Vintage Verb is sort of an industry standard third-party reverb plugin that you can use in any DAW. This one is, I find it sounds pretty similar. It's a very modern, kind of EDM-y, pop-sounding reverb.
Get up, get up, get up, get up.
It's very big. We've got lots of presets. Let's go medium on a vocal hull.
Get up, get up, get up,
We're
get
going to
up.
mix in a bit more reverb. Maybe bring our high cut down. Bring our low cut up a little bit. It's got a nice 26 millisecond pre-delay built in.
Get up, 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 get up.
So we can shape our envelope using the diffusion, size, and decay knobs, as well as increase feedback, as we saw with the silver verb. And all of these parameters are basically starting to repeat themselves. You can see the same ones in each of these. It's really just the interface, how it's shaped. This one has different airy, cosmic, or grounded sort of themes with slightly different parameters and different tones to them.
Get up, get up,
So cosmic's a little bit more warped and psychedelic.
get up, get up, get up, get up.
Grounded is a little bit more warm. I tend to stick to the airy one, which is just a very nice modern reverb.
Get up, get up, get up, get up.
So actually here I'm going to show you the two different ways of applying a reverb. So on our vocal lyric here, I was just applying the reverb straight into the FX chain. And you can control the wet-dry signal, usually independently, or at least with one knob, so you can control how much of the reverb is being sent in. Now, something that is very common practice is to actually put your reverb on a bus to control it. So what I'm going to do is take a send. We're going to go to bus 1. This might look slightly different depending on what software you're using. In Logic, it looks like this, so you get this auxiliary track from your bus. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put our reverb plugin on the bus, turn it on. Let's just throw a guitar preset in here. Let's do a plate reverb Let's do a hot plate, so it's going to be a little kind of distortion-y. We're going to set our dry all the way down and just play with the wet. Now what we're going to do is, currently we are not sending any information to the bus, so we're going to start playing our dry signal and slowly send that dry signal into our bus. So this is going to send the dry signal to the auxiliary track. It'll run that through the reverb, and only our wet signal is actually going to come out of the bus. So that way you have your two signals, wet and dry, coming through different tracks. So now I can solo, and we've only got our wet signal. Now, why would you want to do this instead of just using the dry amount and the wet amount? That's because sometimes you want to use different effects on the dry signal as the wet signal. So for example, if my Reverb plugin doesn't have a built-in EQ, I can actually put an EQ just on the reverb effect. I might want to distort or add a chorus effect to the reverb, or otherwise change the sound of it using other plugins, and this gives me the control to do that separately from my dry signal. Hey, editing Mike here. I also want to say that reverb plays a very large role in my mixing process. And towards the end of this series, when I get into mixing basics, I'll go a lot more into how you can use reverb to really glue different parts together and create a cohesive sound in the mix. I think that's another use case for reverb other than just sound design. So I just wanted to say that as well. And that's about it. So I've shown you two different ways to apply the effect, either through the channel strip or through a bus, which is what I recommend because it gives you a finer degree of control over your reverb. I showed you several different types of reverbs, including stock and third-party options, going over the common types of parameters that you're going to see. We went over the fundamental thesis of reverb, which is giving you creative control over the sound of the room that you would have recorded in, whether that be a synthesizer, a piano, a guitar, a voice. You're changing the mood and the atmosphere of the sound using reverb. I hope this has been helpful. Be sure to leave any questions down in the comments below. Like the video so that others can help find my content, and be sure to subscribe for more music production and Logic Pro 10 basic and beginner tutorials. Until next time, I'll see you then. Have a wonderful morning, evening, night, afternoon, whenever you may be watching this, and farewell.